Hello, Jeff Simpson here with Sports Specific Training. We're back to talk about the rotator cuff today. The rotator cuff are four little muscles that are commonly neglected in all athletes, and especially you guys as baseball players and throwers. We have our little model here today to talk about the rotator cuff. As you look from the front of the model here, you have your collarbone in the front, your upper arm or your humerus here on the side, and obviously from the back you have your shoulder blade coming across the top. The rotator cuff is comprised of four little muscles: the supraspinatus, infraspinatus, and then the teres minor, as well as the subscapularis. Their function of the rotator cuff is to hold that upper arm, that humerus, in place. Your larger muscles of the shoulders, the deltoids, the traps, their idea is to lift that shoulder. The rotator cuff, all these muscles connect up here onto that humerus. Their job is to pull that humerus away from the collarbone and the shoulder blade that kind of make up the roof of that shoulder. Function of the rotator cuff is really one of four things. First thing to do is to externally rotate the shoulder. External rotation is important in pitching. It's the external rotation that is your braking mechanism on the shoulder. The second function of the rotator cuff is to stabilize the shoulder as we do other athletic movements, as we do, for example, the push-up. The prime movers in a push-up are going to be your chest and your tricep. But the stronger that rotator cuff is, the more push-ups you can do, or the more bench pressing you can do. So we use it for that purpose as well. For all you throwers, which is specifically what we're talking about today, the rotator cuffs are the brakes of the shoulder, especially the infraspinatus and the teres minor. That is, after you release the ball and I build up speed, that humerus wants to come out of my shoulder socket as I accelerate that arm. Those little rotator cuff muscles put the brakes as I follow through to keep that upper arm tight into my shoulder socket. Some of the common problems you see with the rotator cuff, the most common problem is your tendinitis. The rotator cuff, as all you throwers know, is an overuse injury. That is something where it's what we call a wear and tear injury. Just from throwing a lot, that muscle gets inflamed. All these little muscles get inflamed and sore. In that case, pretty simple to fix with some exercises, which we're going to show you later, some stretching, and some common preventative measures such as ice. Second thing you'll see is a complete rotator cuff tear. Fortunately, usually we'll only see that in traumatic incidents. You know, a guy falls, plants his arm, more of a football injury, guy tries to catch himself, tears his rotator cuff. The third thing which is important is what's called impingement. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. That's one of the most common things. We talked about it a little bit before, where that humerus, the head of the humerus, will come up and pinch all these white here as tendons. That's where the muscle connects to the bone. And they will get impinged on this roof. So as I, as a thrower, reach that arm up above my head, that head of the humerus, if this rotator cuff is weak, will pinch all these tendons on this bony point here, which is my collarbone and my shoulder blade. So we have to keep that strong, so as I reach behind, as I reach over the head, I can prevent that humerus, the head of the humerus, from hitting up into this collarbone and shoulder blade and pinching all my tendons. Now, so what we're really going to talk about today now is we're going to go into the weight room. We're going to show you some exercises, some good ways to prevent rotator cuff tendonitis.
Jeff, obviously there have been a lot of young players that have been injured, particularly pitchers, at a very, very young age. We have improved technology. We supposedly have stronger athletes, better coaches. The list goes on and on and on. But yet we've reached epidemic proportions where kids are getting surgery at a very young age. How and what do you think is the reason for all that? And I know that we're going to be doing some exercises later, and I do realize that the throwing motion is the fastest human moving body parts of any sport. So I know there's going to be a lot of pressure, and if you don't have strong tendons, ligaments, and muscles to prevent that arm going from the ball, you've got to develop that. So just a few comments, if you will.
One of the things that I think is one of the scariest things that I see is now with the advent of travel ball and all these different, now you can play baseball year round. There's people like us that specialize in baseball. The thing that I see with young kids is they're not putting in the time in the off season and during the season to keep these little muscles strong. This is an overuse injury like we talked about. And unfortunately, a lot of kids think for me to be a better pitcher, I have to throw and throw and throw some more. And that is true. While that is part of the game, you have to be able to prevent and strengthen that shoulder. One of the analogies I use with kids is I always ask the kids that I work with, who's your favorite pitcher? And here in the Philadelphia area, most guys will say Roy Halladay or Cliff Lee. And of course, both of those guys are great examples because they're renowned for their work ethic. And I look at this 12, 15-year-old kid and I say, who's got better mechanics, you or Roy Halladay? And, most of the time, obviously, they answer them, but that's not the case. And then we say, well, who works harder, you or Roy Halladay? And we say, well, who does more training, you or Roy Halladay? And then I follow up with the kid and I say, well, who throws more innings in a week, you or Roy Halladay? And 9 times out of 10, it's the kid because they're playing their high school team and then they go to Legion Ball and they go to their travel teams. And to me, we're putting a cart ahead of the horse. We want these kids to throw and throw and throw some more, but we're not working on the fundamentals of strengthening up that shoulder. And that's what really the rotator cuff serves as. The rotator cuff is the foundation for that shoulder stability. And obviously as throwers and certainly pitchers, we have to have that stability and strength in the shoulder before we can start worrying about increased velocity. And certainly in our case, we're talking about a lot of injury prevention and soreness.
Great. Well, let's get to the exercises and stretches to prevent arm injuries. Thanks, Jeff.